Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today's guest, Paul, we're really going to into the human experience. This was going to go human 2.0. How are you doing today, Paul?
I am doing wonderful. Thanks, David. It's wonderful to be on the show today.
All right, thank you so much. Paul and I met at this point a couple of weeks ago, and by the time the episode is released, a couple of months ago. But he's an incredible speaker, sharp in his pink suit. So everybody knows that I wear my teal suit, but sharp in his pink suit. But he's creating and he's talking about a movement about Human 2.0. Why don't you explain that to us a little bit?
Absolutely. It's really interesting because when people hear human 2.0, first of all, it breeds evolution, right? But then it's like, what type of evolution? And so most people, when you start Googling that, they start thinking man's interface with technology, right? So not just AI, but looking at technology as a whole and like how we're going to interface with that and become what we would call superhuman, right? And there's a lot of things happening from a technological perspective. We're able to use technology to help people who were blind their entire life see. We're able to help people who've never been able to hear a sound hear for the first time. People with were born without limbs be able to walk. We're using nanotechnology to help repair certain traumas in the human body. So all those things are really great. But when you start thinking about where that could go, and how fast that movement is moving, it begs the question of have we really fully explored and experienced our potential as human beings in the human experience, or are we willing to just give it up and say, you know what, I want to interface with technology? And while some of that stuff sounds really cool, so for all the tech geeks out there, yeah, who wouldn't want to have the heads up display on their contact lens or in their eyeball, right? Being able to see things happening and be able to pull information out just by thinking about it. But the question that begs to be answered is, what's the cost? And you start thinking about the cost of that. Of course, there's a financial cost of that. And of course, we can get into that conversation about what it would look like if you had the ability to afford the chip to be placed in your child so that they had access to all the information from the time they were born versus the person who can't afford to do that. But the question is, do you really want your child to be able to have access to all that information and actually bypass the learning process?
Yeah, that's the scary part. I was talking to
Right?
somebody recently about it. Actually, one of my daughters. So we were having a conversation about that. I said, my mom was she didn't want us to get hurt no matter what. She would try to help us, but it didn't help us grow in the way that I needed to. And I've made a lot of my mistakes because of that opportunity. And I had to learn it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Much like I used to say to my daughter, I want you to learn this at 6 rather than 16. And she's not
Mm-hmm.
26 yet. The earlier you learn these things, you have to learn them. And for me as a parent, I've switched a little bit of how I'm parenting in the past couple of years. I still tell them the mistakes I make, and I still make mistakes. And we are making mistakes because we're learning, we're doing other things, and I'm not making the same mistakes I've made. And we need to
Right.
do that. We need to learn not only the mistakes we make, but how to overcome those mistakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when you think about that and that the entire process and just of the learning experience and making mistakes and getting things right and being able to celebrate when you've been able to achieve something, it begs that the question there, really want to bypass that process. But then you can look at it on the flip side too, look even from a physical perspective. Like we all want to be superhuman right now. You got nanotechnology out there, you got peptides. People have been researching peptides since World War One and Two. So this is not a new thing. But all these things can make us more powerful, stronger, faster, better human beings. But there is a part of us that's untapped, and that's the brain, the mind, the whole system of being human. And they've talked about it in ancient times as being a state of enlightenment. Everybody wanted to attain nirvana or
Yeah.
enlightenment. And it's all mystical and it's way up there in the ether. You had to go and meditate on a mountain for 40 years in the dark, uh, or whatever. Back in the day, that was pretty much easy to do. If you thought about, let's just go back several thousand years ago, probably wouldn't see another human being for weeks, months at a time
Sure.
because there weren't that many people on the planet, right? So it's easy to go off in the woods and take a hike or take a walkabout and not see anybody for 6 months. It's easy, right? Not today. 8 billion people on the planet. You got all this technology. You got buildings, infrastructure. We have everyday life. We got social. We got media. There's just all those things are impacting and influencing our lives on a daily basis. And what if we could slow it down a little bit? What if we actually could look at enlightenment as being more an attainment of educational awareness that brings about change within us, and then it helps us pass that information, that knowledge on to other people. And so what I just did there was take enlightenment and made it practical. Like, how do you make that a definition that's practical and not mystical or spiritual? It is spiritual. But do we have to get stuck in the ether? Can we think about what's the process that I really have to go through, what that I need to be willing to engage in so that I can actually achieve it and make it sound like I can actually do that, even in life today. One of our biggest drivers is this need to self-actualize, right? And that really is about engaging in the processes and activities and objectives and goals that lead to a more rich, more fulfilling life. But it's really hard to do that if you're still trying to meet basic needs like food, air, water, shelter,
Yep.
safety type needs, right? Social connection. And those are the things that we have to address first before anyone could actually attain that type of space where you self-actualize. But there's lots of practices out there that help us get there if we actually take the time to purposefully integrate those in our lives. And I think people need to have a path or a blueprint on how to do that and do that in an effective way that doesn't take away from their life, but they can easily integrate into their lifestyle. And then
Sure.
they can start achieving or start attaining or start receiving the happiness, the health, the well-being, the fantastic relationship, the abundance they want to experience in their life. And that's the movement that I'm starting, and that I'm certainly, that's the journey that I've been on, and certainly there's others on the same journey. So I'm bringing together that community in a way that allows us to share that information with each other, but also help other people who are maybe curious, or maybe they've been in a journey and of course they came across the 100,000 gurus on Instagram who were promising enlightenment and full transformation in 5 days, mind you, too.
Yeah.
And they're not getting the result that they thought they were going to get out of the experience.
The problem with I learned some methods, and I'm sure you have also, about how to do some of this quick, this work
Mm-hmm.
quick, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
sustainable. So what you need to do is you can do it initially quick, right? You can knock down a
Mm-hmm.
building in 10 minutes or less. But the truth of the matter is to continue to do the building. That's the consistency. That's the building the right foundation. And I talk about havening, and I'm not sure if you know, so it's a psychosensory touch modality
Mm-hmm.
that does work very quickly. And you can reduce the stress and traumas within ourselves, but to then rebuild what we need to do, the synapses that happen. That's where the power comes into. So I love that you had mentioned about working slower to actually be quicker. And I say that
Mm-hmm.
all the time, but it's when you get the distractions out of the way, you think much clearer. They're getting the clarity, receiving the clarity through our experiences.
Absolutely. There's a saying, as we're sharing this information, I'm thinking the whole term self mastery comes into play, right?
Sure.
And Lao Tzu, ancient philosopher, he talks about knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is wisdom, mastering others is strength, but mastering yourself is true power,
Mm,
right? And that really is the journey about how do we become better versions of ourselves? How do we evolve ourselves? And so when we think about evolution, it's not the whole from as people would commonly hear it, is from apes to man, but it's like we don't need to be the next.
right.
I don't know what that version looks like, but if you're improving yourself, right, then you're evolving. If you're learning more and you're applying that knowledge, you're evolving. But the real question is, are you growing in a way that you can give to others, right? Because it's not just about self. Self is important. You have to grow yourself for sure. But are you giving to others? Right? Because that's the true enlightenment piece, is being able to say, you know what, I've attained all this. Now I'm going to help the next person do the same thing. And it becomes repeatable, right? Because it's about being consistent in yourself, but then can you duplicate that and repeat that process with someone else?
No, 100%. And that's really what it is. It all does start within ourselves. And when it starts within ourselves, we build upon it. And then that's how it expands. I talk about it probably once an episode about Hoponopono. is
Yeah,
that Hawaiian
mm,
prayer to heal within ourselves that with heals within the world. I know when I went into therapy, that was what one of the first things Bill Souls had said to me was that he goes, if you heal yourself, you can heal everybody around you just by healing yourself. And I didn't
that's right.
understand it. I now understand it. And I tell people that because that's really what we are is the more knowledge we obtain, it has to be applied. That's why
Mm,
having that ability really becomes so much deeper because of the ability to change by our learnings. And so
yeah.
how did you start this journey for yourself?
For me, it started, I hate to admit it, it started when, so we all, as children, we all have these goals and dreams, right? And so we
Sure,
all
yeah.
have that. And then obviously life happens, right? And we never really reflect on that again unless something happens in our life. So sometimes it takes a trauma or some kind of
Of
situation
course.
that happens, and we reflect back. And so I've had a couple different pivot points in my lifetime. One when I was in the military, that kind of shifted my experience in a way that I had to rethink what my career was going to look like. I was in the military. I was in the Navy, in the Merchant Marine Reserves, and I was in Desert Shield. I got injured on ship, so that was an experience and that pivoted my life goals. And I was 20 years old at that time when that happened. But I bounced back and I was able to adapt and grow and learn. And I went down another path, got some education, did a career. And then at some point, that career changed. And I decided, okay, now I've moved in from a technology perspective to like being an entrepreneur. And that's a shift. It wasn't
Oh,
traumatic, but it was certainly a shift. And, and I started working in that space, and that was a great space for me. And I learned a lot and I grew a lot. I learned how to become a true leader. And I certainly had experience in the military. As you have experiences with leading other people and the ins and outs and ups and downs of all that, and you have a breakthrough and you achieve that move from management to leadership, and then it's like it's exciting and it's amazing. And I had that shift, and then I woke up one day and I said, you know what, I'm feeling burned out and I feel like
mm.
I'm in a great place. By all definitions, I'm supposed to be successful.
Yeah,
Whatever that looks like. But life wasn't exactly where I needed it to be, and in my career that I thought was so amazing seemed like it was less amazing. And I said, I really want to start helping people, and I really at that time I was just like, I want to help leaders become better leaders, and we needed that.
sure.
We still need that. I embarked on an entrepreneurial journey to start working with leaders, coaching and training, and that grew. It was interesting in the beginning. It started off slow. You get that one contract that comes in, and then it happens to be with OPM. Suddenly things blow up, and you're doing really well, and you're on top of the world. And then you learn new things. I was learning about the neuroscience of cognitive affective neuroscience when it comes to human behavior, and I applied that to leadership because I'm coaching my clients, and I'm excited. I'm developing IP and leadership learning programs. That's exciting. It's amazing. I'm speaking at conferences. It's great. And then I get asked to speak at this conference in 2016, and it was called the Global Institute for Leadership Development Guild. And it was facilitated by this company called Linkage, with they're now HR talent and development firm. But at this conference, I use this in my own presentations sometimes. I saw this number, 29,200. And I'm looking at this and I'm listening to this entire presentation that's being given by one of the keynotes. And somehow, because I was facilitating it in this conference, I had access to all the speakers. And I'm talking to this gentleman. His name is Richard Leiter, pretty known business coach. And he's been doing a lot of research on the area of purpose. And so we had this conversation about purpose and we did the life math. And I became immediately aware of how much time I potentially had left. And I started asking all the questions about, have I really done what I've been here, what I was put here to do? Am I feeling fulfilled in my life? Who am I anyway? I'm starting asking myself those questions. And then the most more important question is, what am I here to do? And who do I need to be to do those things? And
Sure.
those became the questions that I began to ask myself. And I was 46 years old. By the time asking these questions, and it became part of my DNA in the sense that that's all I could think about, purpose. And I started going to other events and I would talk about purpose. And I started having those conversations with people just randomly in a bar or something like that, just sitting down. I'm on an assignment someplace and I'm sitting someplace eating and I have a conversation. So I get in that conversation. And then I go to another conference and it's the Integrative Healthcare Symposium. It's in New York and it happens every year. And again, I go there and I became aware of what was going on in the world. And I started looking at who's sitting in the room. And
Yeah,
that's always
I had a similar story. That's why I'm laughing. Once you
yeah.
started noticing who's in the room and either who you want to be with and them. For me, that my story was that I wanted my girls to be in the room that I was in because it was a
Mm,
women's conference, and Madeline Albright and Geraldine Ferraro were speaking, and I was like,
mm,
I have to be the man that brings my daughters to have the ability to be in a room like that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that was one of the things that came to me. I felt this weight suddenly. I'm listening to this thing, it's 3 or 4 days. I'm listening to all the information. The doctors are speaking. I'm learning about integrative medicine. I'm like, oh, this is really new. But understanding it's not, but new in this from the perspective that I was just learning about it. But I started looking at the communities that were underrepresented that would not have access to the information. And I felt like I'm sitting here for a reason. I'm hearing this all for a reason. I need to figure out a way to be able to articulate this to people in a way that they would understand it. But see, I'm in the DC area, right? So now what does that mean? Oh, I got to get this certification and that certification. I got to have these letters and that letter. Oh, probably need to go back and get my PhD. I'm not ready to do that yet. I probably need to do that because people are not going to listen to me unless I have all the acronyms behind my name.
Sure.
So there's that dilemma. But then I decided to become a functional medicine health coach. And then as I went through that process, I was like, wait a minute, personal trainer through the National Academy of Science Medicine, functional medicine health coach, certified resilience coach, but it deals with the biophysiology of resilience,
Mm.
neuroscience, cognitive and affective neuroscience, brain-based coaching, and brain-based team building. So I'm going through all this process and wait a minute, all this stuff is connected. Why are we separating all this stuff out? It doesn't make sense to me. Then I became a meditation practitioner. And then it was during a meditation that I saw myself in the space where I'm having a conversation and talking about the integration of all these disparate parts that people section out and niche out. I said, can't we talk about it in the same conversation? Because aren't they all related anyway? Doesn't your cognitive health depend on your nutritional health, which also depends on your ability to move your body, which is also impacting your relationships with yourself and other people, which is also, impacting your
Yeah, it's all
mindset and
intertwined, right? Aren't we all
right?
intertwined as a
Isn't it?
series of nerves and energy beings?
Yeah, exactly. We're energy, right? So there's that piece too, like the connection we have with other people and with our planet, with the plants, with life, with the universe, right? The entire connection there. I learned a lot when I started meditating because I became a transcendental meditation practitioner and I learned about the quantum physics behind that. And I'm all about if you can show me the science behind it, but also understood, hey, meditation is ancient wisdom. Right? The people have been doing
Yeah.
this for thousands of years. Who are we to question the, the efficacy of this practice that, what, it's been around for a long time. And there are people that, that we look at historically, at least they've been captured in some book, somebody wrote the story, that these folks were meditation practitioners and they achieved these different things, or these folks had this particular practice and they achieved this thing. And it's like, why are we doing the stuff that we already know works?
Yep. You don't have to always recreate the wheel. We might be
Right.
called something different. That's why a couple of years ago, when I attempted suicide, somebody had suggested, would you try acupuncture? And at that time, I was in so much emotional pain,
Mm,
which became physical pain. I didn't understand really what real depression is. We use that word too often.
mm,
I said, I'm willing to try anything. And now that's part of my wellness practice. And people,
mm,
I have some friends who don't believe any of that. And they're like, what does it make you do? I go, I don't know. I walk in there feeling less good. I walk out feeling better. I go, I don't really care. You know about the points? I go, but I can tell you. And that's what, is really interesting when you dive into more information. So I know when they
mm,
put a pin in, not 9 times out of 10, I don't feel it. But
mm,
there's one time, that ninth time or that 10th time, I'm like, ooh, what does that bother you? Oh, that's your kidney.
mm,
Are you drinking enough? I'm like, No, like you don't believe it. Then it goes another point. What's that? Oh, that's a kidney point also. It's not on your kidneys. It could be on your toe. And
That's right.
and, and I'm like, huh. And once you do it more often and you put faith into the knowledge of somebody else and the
Mhm.
knowledge that's out there, you can really heal yourself and take yourself to that next level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I love the practices. Of course, a lot of times we poo-poo on them in the
Yeah,
West because it's an Eastern practice and it wasn't developed and it wasn't originated from the United States of America. I get that. But the same token, thousands of years, you might want to look into
yeah,
some of those practices and say, you know what, maybe it's worth trying. I say that, but I wanted to take an approach where I don't want to just haphazardly just try all these things and try
oh,
to
right.
make these things happen, right? So it becomes more about what's your intention? What are you really trying to accomplish here? How do you want to live, right? So back to that whole thing about purpose, I started thinking about are the things that I'm doing in my life right now aligning with the person I say that I am or
Sure.
who I want to be and what I intend to bring to the world. And many times that answer was no. And so it was then you gotta let go of that particular activity. I really don't want to feel really comfortable doing that thing, but it's not serving you. And those things, those are the harder things, right? So letting go of relationships, letting go of faith, letting go of activities, letting go of belief systems. That's a process that we have to go through. So even when I can talk about, you know, practical enlightenment, it really comes down to you have to improve yourself. And there's a process, whether it's therapy, whether it's getting acupuncture, whether it's making sure you're doing self care activities like massage, and maybe you need sound healing, maybe you need some energetic healing because we are energetic beings.
Yep.
But you have to
Sure.
consider the entire spectrum of where do I need the healing and do that healing so you can grow beyond that particular trauma and then step into the new version of you that needs to do this other thing. So it's those become the gateway to that self improvement. So it's easy to say you need to improve yourself, but the question everybody asks is, how do I do that? Um,
That's the whole trick is not only how do
mm,
I do it, and because there's so many ways, and that was one of the questions I just thought of asking you
mm,
is how do
mm,
you do it? Because there's so many ways. You just mentioned 15 different ways, but
yep,
sometimes we get distracted. Oh, this isn't working, right? I went to acupuncture once, or I went here once, weight loss, weight
mm,
reduction. Oh, I tried that diet once. Did you really try it? Did you give up? Did you surrender into the process? So, what is something
yeah.
that you would do or that you would advise others to find what works for them? That's really important.
That's the thing, right? You have to find what works for you. What I do personally, and what I do with the folks that I work with, I guide them through a process of identifying practices that one have that can demonstrate the benefits, but two, hey, sometimes you just gotta try it, right? You got to be willing to go to the yoga class, or you got to be willing to go to the sound healing, or you got to be willing to go to that one thing. And even if it doesn't, I don't know if I'm going to say because try it and see what that experience would be like for you. And you know what? If you try it once, maybe try it again, so that you're sure that you
Right.
don't like it, right?
Yeah, really embrace
Um,
yourself. Don't. That's why when I tell people, I go, don't go in. I'm not gonna like it. You could go at it
yeah,
any way you want. It's the
yeah,
results that you're looking for. I know when I was offered acupuncture, I said, okay, I'm willing to try. I'm in so much physical and emotional pain. I'm willing to
hmm,
try anything, and that's how I've gotten what I've gotten. I'm even a sound bath. The first time
yeah,
somebody was like, "Hey, you want to take a sound bath?" and I'm like, "That's woo. Are we sitting in the woods with naked in the woods with some
yeah.
fire?"
What we gonna
You
do?
know. And then I experienced it with gongs and so many different things, and I'm like, "This was the sickest thing." And I felt, and I think if you're really embracing this situation, you're able to really feel as a different person.
Yeah, that's the key. It's like, how did it make you? So we have to ask ourselves the right questions. So you had the experience. How did it make you feel? What did you feel like before, and when you feel like now? A lot of people don't aren't in tune with the mind body connection, if you will. So they can't articulate how they feel. And a lot of people be upset that I just said that, but most people can't articulate how they feel. And when they have an experience, how it makes them feel differently, whether it's worse or bad, it's not really the point,
Right.
right? You have to be able to know I had this experience and it made me feel this way. And sometimes I want to feel this way or I don't want to feel this way. Well, that's half the battle, just having that awareness about what it is that you feel and actually being able to name it. Because bad is not a feeling, but
Right.
sad or depressed or angry or anxious, those are feelings. And so we have to increase our emotional vocabulary first. Then understand, like, where does that feel? Like, so where in the body do we feel that?
Right.
And if we know what that feels like, okay, great. So now we've made some connection and we're making a little bit of progress. But first, we just got to know about how we feel. That's one of the first things we got to understand. But so if we can walk into a situation, have the experience, say, you know what, that made me feel anxious or made me feel like I wanted to cry. So it made me too sad. Okay, well, maybe that's not the practice you do, but there's a 50 other ones. Let's try this other thing. So
And
let's try this new one.
even when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling cry, what is making you feel? You have to be honest with yourself. And
Yeah,
that's one of those conversations that I say, the monsters under our bed are not as scary as the monsters in our head.
in our head.
And why is it making you feel? Because that's where the gems are, right? The gems,
Absolutely.
when you want to pull out a diamond, comes out really ugly, right? The diamond
Yeah.
in the rough is ugly, but you need to polish it. And that's why when I hear, hey, that's going to make me cry, I'm like, okay, do you feel safe with me? In
Mm.
terms of that, if it's okay to cry. And I've said that to men and women. And
Yep.
I go, okay, but let's figure out, why is it making you sad? Is it sad for something that we can heal? And that's the healing process, diving into the healing
Absolutely.
process.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said it because that's so true. People have to, and that's the fear, right? That they don't want to. That's it. I don't want to say they don't want to overcome. It's biologically challenged to overcome fear when you start thinking about fear from perspective of, is the fear of changing greater than the fear of staying in the space that I'm in?
Yeah. Yep.
Because if it is, you won't pivot, you won't move. But if you can find the way to overcome the fear of changing and make that less than the fear of staying the same, then you will be willing and open to try that new thing and actually take it in. So it's really about creating that psychological safety, is kind of what you were describing, is that we got to
Yeah.
create that safe space, a psychologically safe space for people to feel like I can trust this environment. I'm not going to die. And even if the experience doesn't feel great, I got someone right here that's going to support me and I'm going to be okay. Right? I'm going to be okay. And that's where people that are either facilitating these type of experiences or people that are coaching people through these type of experiences, that's where their job comes into play. You got to hold space
Yep.
for that
And,
person to feel.
and you have to understand what the goals are of that other
Mm-hmm.
person. I have two stories. Tiger Woods is an excellent story of,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who took fear. He didn't want anybody else to be number one while he was alive. And
Mm-hmm.
his story was, he used to go out in the middle of the day for practice and throw the golf balls all over certain holes. He would
Mm-hmm.
hit every one of them, not only the practice, but it was each one lied differently. Pete Sampras was number one in tennis. And at one point, he was like, I have to do better. And his coach is like, you're number one. You can't. He goes, no, I can. And he goes, I have to think about the one thing that I'm willing to give up to get me even further where I'm at. And those
Mm-hmm.
really the leadership stories that we have within ourselves. And it might not be number one in the world, but number one to yourself, to your family,
Yeah.
to your community. That is so important. And once I started diving into stories like that, I
Mm-hmm.
think for myself, again, we shared either in the green room or I've shared before, until I needed to have my back against the wall, I
Yeah.
didn't do it as well as I am doing it now. And that's all
Yeah.
because of my focus and who I want to be, not because of who I want people to see what I do. It has nothing
Yeah.
to do with me. It all has to do with myself. And if I'm working with somebody, their growth is more important than who gave them. It's because they're choosing to make their growth. It goes back to having the willingness to make the change within yourself to then change your world and your environment.
Yeah. It's so very true. You mentioned something, and I think that's folks that are having this conversation a lot. We all went through something,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes, and so this is a part of the human experience because we want to prevent. If I can just help you prevent going through that experience that I just went through and actually get to where I'm at without having to go through that, it would make it. Yeah, I feel compelled. It would make me feel so much better to do that. But sometimes you just have to go through the experience. As human beings, we are here to experience the full range of emotions in the time that we're here. And, and sometimes people are like, I don't want to experience that emotion. But then that's when then life gets dealt to us. We experience those things, right? But it would be something, it'd be pretty amazing if we were able to make this available to people in a way so that you don't have to experience trauma to get to that point. You don't have to experience the life or death situation or the choices that we make where we're deciding between life and death, or to have the thing happen to you, or get this diagnosis. So often I hear about those type of experiences that then drive us to then make the decision. But what I said in the beginning was I had a life pivot, and that life pivot put me on this journey. And so the life pivot I had wasn't a life and death situation. My life pivot was more or less, I got fed of where I was.
Sure.
uh,
That's the thing is when I talk about Phoenix Ashes, which is the same thing as a life pivot, it doesn't always have to be that your world blew up. It could be like you lost where you were at, right? In a career. I was in a career much like yourself, that I sat in a room doing the disc assessment and I'm watching all the other people on the right hand side. And here I am on the left. I'm a C, which is almost off chart on the woo side. And I'm like, okay, if this doesn't tell you where I have to be, I wasn't angry. I felt bad because you always want to be with everybody, but you have to be who yourself. And would I have changed any of my beliefs? No. And that's the really powerful part when you get to that level of knowing what pain you are in. Like I said, with my example of the acupuncture, I'll try anything. And I really dove
mm,
into it. So when diving into it, and then also knowing who you are, your most authentic self. That's right. That's what the bat's about. Bringing
yeah,
authenticity today to ourselves.
absolutely. You mentioned in the beginning and in the opening that in the pink suit. And I remember when I was standing on the stage, and a lot of people wanted to ask me about the pink suit, but nobody really asked me. And I think you tell people wanted to ask, "Oh, you look so great in pink. How did you got must be a lot of competent to do this and that and the other thing." And I'm eating it up a little bit because
Yeah.
of course, I wanted to make an impression. So I'm going to walk in the room with a pink suit, but it wasn't. But the pink suit did have significance, and I think I shared that. So first of all, you mentioned it just now: be your authentic self,
Mm.
right? And the pink suit spoke to me that morning. This pink suit spoke to me that morning because the day of the week that it happened to be was a Friday. It was the first Friday in May. Now, the significance to that first Friday in May was about Kentucky Derby, and particularly the Kentucky Oaks is when all the mares run. And I used to go to the Kentucky Derby all the time, and I always wore a pink suit. And the first year I wore the pink suit at Kentucky Derby was because my grandmother passed away and she died of breast cancer. So I wore an
Mm.
all pink suit. And so every year on the first Friday of May, I wear a pink suit, right? And
Oh,
it has a dual representation. And I don't care what people think about it. I don't care if people like it. I don't care if people judge me about it because I'm going to be me. And I do this for a particular reason. I got my own internal reason, my own internal why. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to wear it proudly and not even think twice about it. So we just got to be ourselves. And that was something that was a value of mine. Like being true to my authentic self is a strong value of mine. So I'm always going to do that. But I always try to show up as myself. And I don't ever think that I never did that in the past, but it's so great when you feel like you could step into that and really not care what anybody else thinks about
yeah. No, I agree. That's my green suit. That's my,
it.
why I do various phases of green and teal. It's about grounding.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about the work that I
Mm-hmm.
do is about grounding. And the first time I got it, the first time I wore it, I was like, this is my Superman suit.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of them, different, again, different shades. But when I wear it, I'm like, no, that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it. I've had people in our networks saying, "Oh, you're doing it just to stand out." I'm like, no, I'm doing this to be me. You can either like
Mm-hmm.
it or not. That's up to you. I don't really care. I'm not doing it. It's part of my brand. So yes, if I'm going to show up when I show up for work, yeah, I'm going to wear my green suit, of course. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not about that. It's about the branding. It's about the idea of who I am.
Yeah.
That's why even on the logo, you can't really see it, but it says Uncle Dave. And I had
Mm-hmm.
people say, "Oh, Uncle Dave, people feel weird about their uncles and things like that." I go, but that's not who I am. You want to
Right.
talk to my nieces, talk to my nephews, talk to the
Mm.
people. And there's a story behind the Uncle Dave story. That's
Right.
where you get to know who I am. And that's where the real power is. And now that I know, I'm going to try to remember that first Friday in May in honor of your grandmother because I have pink shirts. People question, like, because I've had that probably maybe the same as you. You wear something different and they go, what? Why don't you come out, Dave? And I've had that conversation. I'm like, one, it's none of your business. Two, I go, I'm not gay, but I shouldn't need to say anything one way or the other. It's my personal life. But
Right.
especially with pink, are you a real man? So I wear pink shirts as well because I'm
Mm,
like, I'm a real man. I can wear it or not wear it.
that's right. Yeah, I love that. So it's interesting to think about that, how people feel and how people think. And at the end of the day, authenticity is obviously one thing, but I think too, something else you just said that kind of that sparked a thought in my head, and that was about how you show up, right? And when I show up, and let's say I teach people, you got to decide how you want to show up moment to moment, right?
Yep.
So when I'm working with leaders, what kind of leader do you want to be, and how does that leader show up? And do you do that every morning? Do you do that every single day? Do you do it before you go into the office? So when I show up for experience and I'm working, I've already decided how I'm going to show before I walk out, whether it's on the stage, whether it's in front of a classroom, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's on a meeting with a client or coaching session, whatever it is. I make a decision how I'm going to show up, and I put myself in that state before I get there. And part of that is what I wear or what I'm listening
Mhm.
to or any of that, right? So there's lots of different ways you can put yourself in state, and sometimes just putting yourself in the mental state just by thinking about it
Yep. No,
and
what?
shifting that physiology, and you do that. And so those are like, you were talking about practices earlier. These are things that seem like they're little and they're nuanced, but it's like, yeah, but you can do that anytime you want to. You can change how you feel and how you show how you present instantly
Yep. For sure.
by doing this one thing or that one thing. You It's the teal suit. Boom.
Yep.
Now when I see teal, that's the real David right there.
Yep. That's why when I show up,
Yeah.
I mean, if you noticed over that weekend, I had three different teal jackets, and because that's who I am, and that's when I'm showing
Yeah.
up to be fully present in the environment. That's what I do. I was next to last, and people are like, "How'd you get yourself up for that?" I go, "I
Mm.
knew that I committed to Jose, and I was glad that Jose gave me an opportunity to speak at his conference. It didn't matter where he put me. I wasn't one of those people like, oh, I need to be here, I need to be there. Yeah, I would have loved to have the full room, but the room was full, and I got to tell you, when I walked off the stage, there were a lot of people who heard my speech. So those
Yep.
people needed to hear that. You never know that one person who you're going to hear that one story. And that's the real powerful part of showing up all the time as yourself.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and reiterate what you just said. You never know who's going to hear it,
Yep.
and that one thing, no matter who's in the room, but you got like I said in the beginning, the right people were there. All the right people were there.
Yeah. So we've spoken a while, and I don't want to take much more of
Hmm.
your time, but I'd like you to walk into my little magic garden, and I'd like you to plant. I know
Absolutely.
you've given us a lot of things to think about. Could you give us one more seed, even in something that you might have already said that will grow, that will put in the garden to grow, and share something with us?
Yeah, you were asking about my story, and I started you when I got on that purpose path, and I think that it's an important thing to refocus on. I told you about the 29,000. So folks who didn't know, 29,200 is the number of days and the life expectancy of a human being. So you take your age, you multiply by 365, you take that number, you get subtracted from, let's say, 30,000, you get a number. Right. So that's interesting. It can be sobering in some
Mm,
respects, but it certainly puts us in a frame, said, okay, if I don't know what I'm here to do, I probably need to figure it out. But I'm going to give everybody a nugget. And so fundamentally, our purpose is really to grow ourselves and then give to others. And so some of us are doing one or the other, but we're not doing both.
sure.
Because it's easy to give to others, but not feed yourself. And there's a lot of people out there who do give to others, but they don't feed themselves, so they're not fulfilled. There are a lot of people that are growing themselves and refuse to give to others, and they're not happy. But our fundamental purpose is to grow self, give to others. How you do that is your calling.
Sure. Yep.
How we do that is your calling. Mine is mine, yours is yours. But it is around that fundamental, growing yourself, giving to others. So those who are out there not understanding and not knowing what their purpose is, I just gave you the nugget, hopefully,
For
to help
sure.
simplify the process. Because what you're trying to do is, how do I grow myself? How do I give to others? What's the way that I do that? That's what you need to figure out. That's what we, folks like myself and David, help people do. Let's figure it out together. We're going to walk with you. We're going to walk hand in hand.
Okay. And how could somebody contact you so you can walk hand in hand with them and help them find their
Awesome.
own nuggets?
There's a couple ways. One, there's a QR code right here on my screen. If you put your camera there, that'll take you to my link tree. But if folks who aren't able to see me, you can do dot Paul McFadden at on Instagram, and that will get you in touch with me and certainly give you all my contact information, all that information as well.
Okay. And we'll put that, I'll of course put that in the show notes when I release the episode.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time and the knowledge that you've just shared with us, making us better humans as humans 2.0, as we always can continue to upgrade and make modifications. But thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. It's been an honor and pleasure being here, serving you. Thank you for that opportunity and serving your listeners. So hopefully we will be doing some more work in the near future.
Yes, sir. And just be talking about service. I know that you served the military, so thank you for your services. We always want to support you for writing that blank check, and I'm glad that was not cashed. But thank you for supporting the rest of us. And for everybody
Awesome. Thank
else,
you.
just find your peace and love in life. Get yourself upgraded to human 2.0. And then when you bring a bat, be authentic, as we say, but also bring awesome thoughts to you, always full of love. Thank you, and hit your sweet spot.